Hey everyone, before I delve into this particular topic, I want to point out first and foremost that I have nothing personal against any of these immigrants coming from these foreign countries, whether it's from the Middle East or Northern Africa or some of these conflict zones. I have no problem whatsoever with Canadians offering to help and support those who are oppressed even worse than we are in some of these foreign countries under these authoritarian dictatorships or regimes. It's that mixture of utilitarianism, meritocracy, and moral and ethical capitalism, and being principally astute in understanding that, we help those that can't help themselves. That's something that most human beings recognize and acknowledge and accept intrinsically and instinctively. That's not something that has to be necessarily hammered into the people's minds. But there are proper means and measures in how you propagate your ability to help others, right? If you steal from people to give to someone that you deem more worthy, then you're not really being morally or ethically principled. You're just choosing winners and losers. And in this modern era, people use the power of the state, the big gigantic gun in the room, as a means to impose their moral edicts on everyone else in a particular geographical landmass or a particular country. That's the wrong way to do it. If you want to help people out, help them out and do it yourself and do it voluntarily. But to force others to do it when you don't actually know their personal economic situation, you might be causing more harm to people that you might deem as having some kind of privilege. But once again, that's completely subjective in nature. You don't know every human being's story, their history, or how they grew up, or the economic attributes and wealth that they've accumulated. Nobody does. And they haven't invented an algorithm or people that are willingly, that's the thing, even if they come up with some algorithm that could figure this shit out, that would also require everybody to be willing to offer with 100% truthfulness the reality of their personal social economic situation, which most people won't. Right? So that's never going to happen. You're never going to create a one-size-fits-all or be able to create some central planning model where everybody, where this utopian egalitarianism will actually come to exist in real life. It's always going to remain a fiction. Well, as far as I can see, in the near future or even in the far off future, as far as I can understand and comprehend. And what this is all pertaining to is a CBC article under the heading "Beginning Again." Unable to find work, many Syrian refugees reluctantly turn to social assistance. Biggest challenges include lack of English skills and trouble transferring foreign credentials. So even just based on this headline alone, what we're hearing is there are a lot of these people that are being brought into this country by your central planning political hacks, right? And all the bleeding heart leftards, libtards that try to put forth and present this narrative that, we're doing this just to help them. Well, are you really helping them? I mean, these people are going to have their psychology and their ability to take care of themselves, that self-esteem, right? All that entails, it's going to be destroyed over the course of trying to find themselves in the Canadian culture or trying to find their place in Canada. I mean, some of them will, weed through all that bullshit and come out on the other side of it as a better person as a result. But many of them, as we know time and time again, many of them will not. So what you're really doing is taking the people that, especially if these are people that are somewhat intellectually astute, is they probably would have been much better off in their domestic countries in Syria if they're truly, smart people, right? Creative, entrepreneurial in any way. Well, those are the people that you really need in places like Syria to rebuild that country. If you keep taking all of the best of those people, the brightest among them, and bringing them to Canada, well, that's a detriment to Syria and the people that live there. Sure, you might think it's a benefit to Canada, right? And people could put forth and present that kind of narrative that it's a benefit to bring these people to this country, but think about the other side of that. Think about the flip side of that. Well, if they're a benefit to Canada, they would have also been a benefit to Syria, right? But if they're here, who needs it most? Canada or Syria? It would seem to me that it's Syria that is in much more demand of these very kind of people, at least based on the kind of narrative that the political propagandists and the media hacks put forth and present, right? That these are economic migrants. These are people coming here to fill the void in the Canadian jobs and prospects and be able to take up and assume the roles and responsibility that I guess Canadians are just incapable of doing so, or I guess too lazy to do, right? But even with all that bullshit set aside, right? Sorry for rambling on. I tend to do that from time to time. But let's get right into the meat of the article. Syrian refugee Ragheb Al-Turkmani arrived in Canada on a cloudy day on January 27, 2016. Unable to say a single word in English, but brimming with happiness he couldn't express. Well, first off, isn't one of the requirements to come to Canada that you're at least somewhat proficient with the language? Right? I don't know. After he and his wife moved with their young daughter and 2 teenage sons into the Halifax apartment that would become their home, he decided he wanted to give back to the community that had welcomed his family. I found myself going down, cleaning the streets. Al-Turkmani says through an interpreter, here I thought I was doing good, helping people by cleaning the entrance of the building. Al-Turkmani smiles as he recalls how he swept up what he thought was dirt. It turned out to be salt put down to de-ice the sidewalk. We have so many people with us who have the desire to work and to be productive, he says. But Al-Turkmani, a former school bus driver, is still out of work, and he's not the only one. For the first year after landing in Canada, refugees are supported by either the federal government or private groups. And when they say federal government, the federal government has no money. It's not a profitable fucking business. It's a wealth redistribution entity. They take from the productive members in Canadian society and give to these people. I'm already pissed off when I hear the kind of rhetoric that these fucking people in the media put forth, because like I say, it's just softballing. It's just bullshit platitudes, and rather than just being completely open and honest with the people in regards to what all this truly means. But that support has ended for most Syrian refugees, and many of those unable to find jobs have turned to provincial social assistance. Yeah, welfare. Like people like myself and many others have been saying, the majority of these people from some of these foreign countries, they're coming here and they're living off of the taxpayers. The ones that are forced, basically enslaved, to pay into this big, gigantic, mafia-type, quasi-religious outfit called the government, right? Where they get to go around and they don't even have to hold the gun to your head. They just get the businesses to take it right out of your paycheck, where they constantly take more and more and more of your productive income, of your productive wealth, with no permission, right? Just rampant theft on a rampant scale. But as we're seeing time and time again, it's not going to help the domestic population. That whole pretense of the social contract that we're seeing time and time again. No, they're actually bringing people here to the tunes of thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and forcing the Canadian tax serfs, the tax slaves, the wage earners, to subsidize and pay for these people that they're bringing here. I mean, that benefits the central planners, big government, because they get to maintain their bureaucracy and all the systems that they implement. And those that benefit from that forced income or wealth redistribution model, right, the bureaucratic, the parasitical class, yes, those people continue to benefit, as we see time and time again. In reality, those are really the ones that benefit the most. The Syrian people here, as we're seeing, no, they're just being brought to this country and being forced to go on to the fucking public dole, right? To have their self-esteem, to have anything that even resembles their ability, like this person saying he's a hard worker and all this shit, right? Well, how's that working out for you? Obviously not so well. So this person, this gentleman, for his family, they're going to see are we really beneficial in Canada? Dad is living off of the Canadian people, right? Dad has, he might have been productive in Syria, maybe had some dangers and some hardships, although that war is winding down, and Syria has shown that ISIS is losing grip on any fucking semblance of power in that country, and they're being forced out there on a daily basis. And battles have been won many, many times. So really, these Syrian people should be back there helping to rebuild their country. Maybe they should have held out a little bit longer than listen to the kind of bullshit rhetoric that these political propagandists in the media and these government fucks or these crony corporatists put forth presented. Oh, come here, we'll take care of you. And don't worry, the Canadian people, we're so loving and so embracing of multiculturalism. We'll all fucking be willing to do whatever we have to help you. Which in reality, like I say, there's so many things that are wrong with that fucking whole concept, that whole idea. And like I say, it's devastating to not just the Syrian people, but the domestic population in Canada as well. But anyways, I don't want to read too much in this article. It's basically just anecdotal experience and putting out numbers. But the one thing that I will point out is the numbers, the statistical number of how many of these Syrian refugees are now on the public dole. Right? Now living off the proceeds of theft, right? That forced wealth or income redistribution that is quasi-socialist Canada. Kanakistan is the term I've coined for it for the last few years anyways. But they are now at 60%. So 60% of all those Syrian refugees that were brought here are now living on social assistance. How long that will be? Well, it might be their entire lives, and the numbers might continue to skew upwards, especially when you consider there are more and more people vying in Canada and a lot of our Western cultures and democracies vying for a shrinking pool of jobs. And a lot of the good paying jobs, well, we're seeing they're long gone. They no longer exist. So it's now people are vying for lower paying jobs or minimum wage jobs. Or now you even have algorithms, artificial intelligence, and sophisticated software and robots that are now vying for those same shrinking pool of jobs, right? So like I say, this is just the worst fucking scenario possible, not just for the Syrian refugees, but for the domestic population, and even ultimately in the long run for these central planners. But like I say, these central planners, they're short-term thinkers because they work and function in the realm of politics where it's just over the 4 or 5 year period till they might be removed from office. So everything's short-term and all about the here and now for those type of people. The long-term consequence effects and the devastation, the result of all this central planning and this forced subjugation and this indentured servitude and slavery, that's only felt by the lowly serfs, the lowly subjects, the lowly slaves. 60%, folks, right? The bullshit lies they told you, that was the myth. Oh, we need these economic migrants to take up and assume the task, roles, and responsibility that Canadians, I guess, are too inept or unwilling to assume. That was the bullshit narrative. That was bullshit lies. That was the myth they espoused. The reality is the fact that the numbers don't lie, right? The rhetoric is bullshit, but the numbers, the math doesn't. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.